Okay, welcome to the 29th episode of Meet Your Makers. I can't believe we've got that many. We've had that many conversations already, but a little over 2 years has gone by. We've had many great winemakers and owners on here, and we're really proud of what the show's become. And we're going to welcome Molly Lonborg and Bob Tillman from Alta Colina tonight, and we'll learn a little bit about them. But let me just do a quick thing, so we'll lead in. Shared screen.
Go full size on the screen too, Mike.
Oh, yeah, I got it. Okay, so are we in? There we go. Is it working?
No, we don't see it yet.
What's going on here? Huh. Hold on just a second.
Maybe you should get Chris to help you.
Oh, there we go. Oh, you actually have to hit the share button. Sorry. Are we good now?
Yeah, you're looking good.
Okay. Well, so welcome everybody. Tonight we have Molly Lonborg, winemaker, Alta Colina, and of course Bob Tillman, founder and owner and winemaker, Alta Colina. I met Bob, probably over 10 or 12 years ago at his the old tasting room, which was down the road. You were upstairs above who, Bob? You told me.
Villicana, which is now Refined Distillery. Yeah.
Right. So we enjoyed the wine then, and we continually have gone back over the years on and off. And he makes a terrific Syrah and the Viognier, and he has some wonderful wines. And then I had the pleasure of meeting Molly on Friday with the Wilds, and we got to meet her and Bob and chat for a while. So welcome, Molly Lonborg and Bob Tillman, and I'm going to turn this over to Jason. What happened?
Go ahead. Thank you, Mike. We can finish enjoying the end of this video.
Now we're getting to the real stuff.
The trailer pond.
I lost my, the trailer pond, right. Yeah, we're going to go up there next time, Bob.
Okay.
Sure.
And is it, are you obligated to drink a can of rosé when you stay out there?
Well, you're not obligated, but we encourage it. That's for sure.
And Mike, now we've got your Gmail. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Let's take a look.
I lost my, oh, there's the buttons. Never mind.
So this is the trailer pond here, which we rent out. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
That was awkward.
Beautiful nonetheless.
Cheers.
And it looked like a great place to go visit for sure, and to have at least a can of rosé, if not something else.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody. Apologies for the delay, the technical challenges. I know it was tricky for some of us finding the button tonight, but thanks for figuring out and getting in. Also want to thank everybody here that a lot of familiar faces that came out last Saturday to join us for the annual party. It was a beautiful event, and beautiful day, great property, and couldn't have gotten any luckier on the weather. So thanks to all you that came out, and Mike, thanks to you again for putting it all together. So today, as Mike mentioned, we are honored to have Alta Colina here in Bob and Molly, and kind of almost 2 generations of winemaking, so to speak. And excited about this conversation and learn a little bit more about the two of you and what's going on at Alta Colina. Bob, if I may start with you, prior to winemaking, so you launched things in around 2003. Do I understand that correctly?
Yep, that's right. Mhm.
Okay. So tell us about prior to 2003 first. What was the pre-wine career? What did you do before?
Well, I did electronics. I'm a retired electrical engineer. I studied. I got a bachelor's degree in 1969 and a master's degree in 71 or 2, somewhere in there. And I worked in the electronics business for 34 years, always scheming to launch a wine business, and eventually succeeded in doing so.
Where were you at that time?
So kind of the history is after I got my initial degree, I was in Dallas. I worked for Texas Instruments for about a little less than 2 years, and then I went back to grad school in the Bay Area, and that's where I fell in love with wine. I took a wine appreciation night class in the Free University. I see some gray hair out there, so some of you might remember the Free University. That was the hippie deal. You could do tie-dye, you could do Zen Buddhism, amongst other things, was wine appreciation. So my wife, Lynn, who's sitting right over here, and I took that as kind of a break from the grind and never got over it. And after that, I worked at Hewlett Packard for 25 years, retired from there and joined my college roommate in a small business down in San Luis Obispo. And worked there until the end of 2002, and then bought 2 mountains right behind where I'm sitting right now and started down the road.
So electronics sounds like quite a career in the electronics as an engineer, right? So building some products.
I did. I was a true nerd. In fact, I'm pretty much still a true nerd, truth be known. My first product is still in production. It's a you guys aren't going to care very much about this. It's an X-band Yig oscillator for microwave sweeper application. So it's a device that can generate a signal, and you can use it to test maybe a communications link or a radar system or something like that. They're still building it.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, as dynamic as the electronics industry is,
Yeah.
to have a product that's still in production.
Well, so the stuff that's dynamic is basically the silicon side of things, where they're Moore's law keeps advancing, pushing things ahead. But if you get back to sort of analog microwave stuff, it doesn't change that fast, actually. Yeah.
Got it. So you establish a taste for wine when you're in the Bay Area.
Yep.
You end up in Passo's backyard.
Yeah.
Is the purchase of the property because of your proximity to Paso at the time, or was there more to it? Was it soil, climate related, or?
Yeah, there was definitely some hints. So my tasting career started in the 70s, and I was a cab guy. I mean, I was living in the Bay Area and drank a lot of cab. Actually, I drank some Paso wine in those days, and I didn't know it was in Paso. It was a Hoffman Mountain Ranch, HMR, which is now Dow, by the way. This was in 1975, so literally 50 years ago. Chenin Blanc, amazingly enough. Lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
Your tasting journey.
Yeah. So cab followed by Zin, about a decade of Zin, and then the discovery of Rhone varieties.
I'm also curious how you start a passion, a love for wine kind of early on. It seems like it's amplified when you get to the Bay Area. But you're drinking cab mostly. You're a big cab fan. How do you then decide, okay, I'm going to pursue this passion in Paso versus Napa?
So it went Cab, Zin, Rhones, and so Rhones for the last decade, say the decades of the 90s, I would say. Basically, I got tired of pyrazines, is what it boiled down to, the little herbaceous notes that you find in Bordeaux varietals. So when I retired in January of 2003, we launched a search, actually. Lynn and I, my wife, we went to Walla Walla, Washington, and started our way down. We went from there to Yakima and then down through the Willamette Valley and the Umpqua Valley, and we skipped Napa Sonoma because we couldn't afford it. It was not worth. We couldn't look there, But all that time, we were leaning toward Paso because we were living down here. We knew about the incredible similarities. The climate here and the soils are so similar to what goes on in the Southern Rhone Valley that basically these vines do not realize that we've spirited them 8,000 miles and replanted them. They still think they're at home. They're on a very steep slope now compared to a flat area where they were Caesar planted them all those years ago, but they don't know that. They can't sense it. So yeah, that's how we ended up here.
Just not as many of these.
The rocks.
Yeah. I just did soil samples today to send into a lab, and we had a hell of a time getting them because there's so damn many rocks in the ground. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think this got stuck in my shoe and shutting up the pop. Okay, so I want to switch over briefly. Molly, you Northern California? Is that your origins, Mendocino?
Yeah, born and raised in the town of Mendocino.
Which proximity to big metro areas, but a little bit of a small town feel?
Actually, not near. So we are 3.5 hours away from San Francisco. The nearest city would be Ukiah, which was 1.5 hours, and Santa Rosa, which was 2 hours. So to get to a Costco, Trader Joe's, or a mall, we were driving 2 hours on super windy roads. So it's literally 1.5 hours of like the craziest windy roads just to get to the coast where Mendocino is. And it's where the redwoods meet the Pacific Ocean. So absolutely stunning and gorgeous, but very isolated. And it was kind of a little hippie artist town.
The hippie thing appears yet again.
Yeah, but yeah, town of 1,000 people. So very small.
Wow, 3.5 hours. I wouldn't have done that calculation. That's longer than I thought.
Yeah.
So what does a young person do for fun in a town like that?
Well, spent a lot of time outside for sure. We kayaked, went kayak fishing, hiking, played soccer, went mushroom hunting in your backyard, go crabbing, get mussels at low tide, go abalone diving, just kind of everything outdoorsy, really. To get to any of these semi-metro areas, we would drive through the Anderson Valley. So Highway 128 you could either get out on Highway 20 or 128, but 128 is the main road we would take out. So I grew up like driving through Anderson Valley and Vines. Boonville, the town, is only 45 minutes from Mendocino. However, we were just never a wine culture there. There was another large crop in the area, but it was a little greener and a little bit less publicly.
Very aromatic.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I definitely had no idea. Wine was not something I grew up with. We were joking the other day how like my gateway wine was $2 Chuck when it first came out because it was actually good. And like my parents would let me take that, they'd be like, don't touch the Navarro, but like you can take the $2 Chuck. But yeah, I came to Cal Poly to study earth and soil science. Again, with like no plan of wine in my future.
So wine was a discovery after you started pursuing that, started studying soil and viticulture, focus on organic and sustainability.
Yeah. So it's funny. I did my so Cal Poly, you have to choose a major when you start. It's not one of those schools that allows you to come in undecided. And I really thought I wanted to do something in the environmental science or maybe sustainable development work actually abroad. I spent a lot of time traveling when I was younger. And I thought if there was ways that I could kind of like travel and help communities in other places would be really cool. So the closest thing I could find was earth and soil science. It was actually earth science, but at the time, earth and soil science were one department. So we pretty much like shared curriculum. And it was so funny because I remember in school being like, oh, soil classes, like, I'm so glad I'm an earth science major. It's way more interesting. But then I would like get deep into these soil classes and be like, oh, this is really cool too. But I was like, I get to do geomorphology and you're doing like another soil class over there. But I did a year and a quarter at Cal Poly, and then I spent a year studying geology in New Zealand. And again, still didn't get into wine there. I like went and did a little wine tasting. I always enjoyed wine, but didn't work in the wine industry there. I was just studying geology is a great place to do that. And then I came back to Cal Poly, and that's when they started the wine and viticulture department. So it wasn't a thing when I started. At that point, I was over 2 years into my studies, which I loved, but I was able to kind of do a concentration in wine and viticulture. And so my whole plan was to go and do sustainable or organic vineyard work. That was my goal.
How did you make that transition?
To the winery?
Yeah, well, from just soil work to going into vineyard work specifically. What put the wine part of that on the radar for you?
You know, I just, again, I like learned about this wine department at Cal Poly, and they had this really cool club called Vines to Wines. My brother went to Cal Poly like 5 years before me. We overlapped for a year, and he kind of like introduced me to some cool teachers over there. He had done a few of the classes. And I got in with the club and then just kind of started taking some of the classes, and then it kind of opened my eyes to this industry that was all around me that I didn't really realize. You know, I waited tables all through college, so I was always like around wine, and I've always enjoyed drinking it. But all of a sudden I found this really cool industry where you could work hard and play hard. And my original like real interest was like, oh my gosh, I can harvest hop. Like I love to travel, but I also like to work hard. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I can travel all over the world with this. And unlike other jobs where when you like continuously move jobs, it like doesn't look good on your resume. But in wine, if you've worked a lot of harvest and gone all over the world, it just helps build your knowledge. So that was my original goal with it. Funny enough, I never ended up even working a harvest out of the country. But I ended up just getting kind of sucked in locally, really.
So you mentioned that $2 Chuck was your gateway. Was there a wine that you remember that made you think differently about wine? That
You
really
know,
opened your eyes?
it's funny. I don't have that like aha bottle that people
No.
talk about, but when I was working at Halter Ranch, I was fortunate to go to the A7 conference, the first one that they held, which was at Law Estate, and then we put on the other ones after that. And that first one, there was this great seminar with Anne Charlotte from Fondelieu and Chateauneuf-du-Pape, and her wines and just everything about her was so inspiring. This was probably 2011, 2012. And at the time, there wasn't like a lot of female winemaker mentors that I had come across in my path. And so seeing someone like her who's doing it, and then Jordan Fiorentini was up there and Helen Keplinger, and it was just kind of a really inspiring time. And I just remember Anne Charlotte's wines and really all of Chateauneuf-du-Pape. Like sometimes I remember like originally trying some of the old world wines and not completely getting it all at first. And then when I got to Chateauneuf-du-Pape, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what it's all about. Like, I've made Bordeaux and Rhones, but my love has always been for the Rhone wines. So I have to give my hats off to Anne Charlotte and Fondelieu, but really all of Chateauneuf-du-Pape, really just like, yeah.
Yes, for sure. Bob, how about you? Was there a aha bottle for you?
Possibly. I'm thinking about that. Napa was a very young place when we first started investigating wine, and I think probably the wine that might have made the greatest impact on us was a 1974 Robert Mondavi Cabernet Sauvignon. This was when he'd barely opened his winery. It was just new that year, and at the time it was like the vintage of the century, 1974. It was a great wine, and I really enjoyed the hell out of it. But maybe the reason it popped into my mind is that I have a stash back there on a pallet that's just a total mess. And I was sorting through it a couple of weeks ago, and I found I still have a bottle of that available.
Really?
and it still has the
Of
price
the
tag.
74?
1974. It has the price tag
Oh.
on it. I bought it at Beltramo's in Menlo Park, $7.95.
When are we opening it?
I don't know if you really want to open that thing.
Yes, we do. First day of harvest, 2024.
I think I should auction it off. It's going to be worth something, maybe.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
Huh. So, how about non-wine? Bob, start with you. Your go-to non-wine adult beverage.
Well, ah. So I can tell you a story on that one.
Okay.
What you thought was going to be a simple question.
Stories are great.
So when we started, we planted the vineyard, and we got 4 years into the vineyard before we ever got fruit. And on a long line of just sort of lucky coincidences, literally 3 or 4 months before I was going to get my first fruit, Alex Villicana, who is our next door neighbor, called me and said, "Would you like to make wine in our facility?" And I was like, yeah, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And then over the years, we were in there for 8 years, and he morphed that into, he got really interested in distilling. In fact, he was the first person in Paso to do this distilling based on wine. It's now Refined Distillery in the big letters and Villicana Winery in the small letters. But on his the first release he released a gin and a vodka. And this would have probably been in, I don't know, 2012 maybe or so. And Lynn and I, we were working over there, and so we bought a bottle of that to support Alex, and we put them in our cabinet. And the bottle of vodka is still there, untouched. And about, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, I'm going to blame this on Lynn. We started thinking maybe a gin and tonic at the end of the day might be a good idea. So we opened that bottle, and we drank that, and it's a few more and a few more. And one of the things that happens here on Adelaide Road is the neighbors, we help each other out. And one of the things Monica Villicana does is oftentimes she'll come over here to borrow a cardboard box from us. She'll say, "Got a 12-pack, I need to ship something to Colorado." And we do the same. And one day she popped over here to get a 12-pack, and she had a bottle of gin with her. And she gave it to me, and she said, "I looked at our records, and the first bottle of gin lasted you approximately 10 years, but in the last 3 months, you've bought 4 more bottles. So I thought I'd just give you one." So G&T, to answer your question.
Which is great on a hot Paso day for sure,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Molly, how about you?
I'm a cider girl. I like me some Bristol cider or mezcal.
Oh, well, that's both ends of the scale there, right?
I mean, also I don't discriminate on alcoholic beverages for the most part, but I'm not that big of a beer girl. I'm more of a cider fan. And then I love me a good G&T tequila, and then mezcal has recently won my heart.
Oh, yeah. There is I don't remember the name of it, but over at Bodega de Edgar, he sells a bottle of a spirit that is a mix between tequila and mezcal, which sounds fascinating, but I haven't tried it.
Crazy.
So, Bob, when you started, you bought the property in 2003?
Yep.
Or was that your first vintage?
Nope. We bought it in 2003.
Okay. What other experience? Did you have any other experience in the industry, or did you just go for it?
Well, my main experience was drinking a lot of wine over a 34-year period of time.
Your garage. Don't forget about your
Oh,
garage.
okay, that's true. I made garage wine. Yeah, so I made wine in my garage for a long time. Yeah, I was a
But
pro.
for the
I pretty
most
much
part,
was sure I knew what I was doing.
for your professional production, though, is you just bought and started straight up. No time at any other wineries.
No, well, basically I started at the top. So, so I was the owner of 130 acres of mountains that had nothing on them. That was my first job. And my second job was getting 31 acres of vines planted up there, which took almost 2 years. There was no water, no power, no fencing, no road, and no trellis. So it took a while to get all that taken care of. And then 4 years later, I was the owner of a winery, thanks to my neighbor calling me up and saying, "Hey, would you like to make wine over here?" And then 2 years
So
after that, we actually sold a bottle to somebody.
Were you making wine downstairs, Bob, in Villa
Yeah,
Conta?
yeah. Mhm.
So what year did you open that tasting room above Villa
We,
Conta?
our first vintage was 2007 over there, and we have a 2-year barrel program. So our tasting room opened in 2009.
And Bob and I weirdly met the first day they opened their tasting room. Isn't that crazy?
no way. And you
Yeah.
guys remember that?
I do, yeah.
I just remember the crazy girl with dreadlock in her hair.
I think you were pretty. You had just opened when we happened
Yeah,
upon
I
your
think
place
so.
back in. We started going up there with friends in probably '02, but our best one of our best friends, she was very diligent about finding the new hot wineries to check out. So that's
Mhm.
how we ended up there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, no, go ahead, Bob,
I was
please.
just going to say our first vintage, 2007. It's the third leaf on the vines, and we kept the crop down, but still they're baby vines. We submitted all those wines to Parker, and we got 90+ points on all of them. We were pretty happy with it.
That's got to feel really good for a first vintage,
Yeah, yeah,
especially after what 4 years of labor to get that thing up and running, and
yeah,
that's the kind of validation that you probably need at that point, right?
yeah. That
Were
was
there any-
good.
Did you buy were there any vines there, Bob, when you bought the property, or
No, it was just dirt. It was
Okay.
yeah, pretty.
so you started from scratch pretty much?
Yeah, exactly.
So in that, roughly 20 years, give or take, you've certainly seen a lot of changes in Paso. Uh, a lot,
Yes,
right?
yes.
What do you attribute to the success and the kind of the magic of the region?
Well, the fundamentals are solid here. We have incredible soils, and our climate is great. This hot day, cold night thing is really very, very special. You plant the right grapes, Rhones are really good. You can make tremendous wines here, and it surprises people because it's, especially if you go back 10 or 12 years, it's like the middle of nowhere, Timbuktu. Come and taste these wines is like, holy Toledo, what's going on here? So that's a big part of it right there. And the other part of it, I think, is just the camaraderie and spirit of mostly a bunch of young people, sort of Molly's gang.
Thanks for calling me young. Appreciate
You
it.
know, there was a handful of guys, girls too, that brought a spirit to the place. There's a spirit of community and camaraderie and mutual support, and serious about making it happen. I think that's
What
what
do
it
you
is.
attribute that to? I mean, you've got to see a lot of change in Paso. Uh, as a personal passion of my wife and I, is we like to travel the world and visit wine regions. And I've just never seen anything quite like it, domestically or not, where
Mhm.
there's just this sort of collaborative spirit. What do you attribute that to from what you've seen and experienced?
Well, I think it might have been intrinsic. So I showed up here in 2003, so I don't consider myself an old timer by any stretch. But I think Paso itself has had it's been a fairly remote cow town forever. And I think there's been a real community and spirit here. And some of the early guys, if you think back, so you had John Alban, who set up down in Edna Valley, not here, but he helped plant some of the early vineyards, like James Barry, for example. And Justin Smith and a group of young whippersnappers, not so young anymore, I guess. So Scott Hawley is in that group. Eric Jensen is there. Matt Trevison, Chris Cherry, Terry Hogue. So they had we call them the cool kids. They're not kids anymore. And I think they drove a lot of the people discovering us because their wines are so damn good. And they clearly featured that spirit of teamwork and cooperation and support. And I think they kind of led the charge, but behind them, there was a whole plethora of similar situations just waiting to be found.
Yeah, and I think also that Paso really benefited from, that old saying that a rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
Like I'm a little bit behind Bob in my timing here. So I graduated from Cal Poly in 2009 was when I started working in the wine industry. And I remember in 2010, I was working in the cellar up at Justin, and that's when the article came out of the, you know, Saxum 2007 James Berry Vineyard was the #1 wine in the world.
Yeah.
And like, that's when that was a really big deal still, you know? And I remember it was like the end of a busy day of harvest, towards the end of harvest, and Fred brought the magazine out, and like we brought champagne, and like everybody was just celebrating it. And it was just like Paso, like this is Paso, you know? And so I don't know. I feel like we came into it with more of like a sense of community and everybody doing well rather than a sense of competition. And,
Yeah.
you know, now the scenery is a little different. You can look out your windows and see other vineyards, but like Bob was saying, forever, it was like hills, 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 hills. Oh, a vineyard. Oh, drive 20 more minutes, find a vineyard, you know? And so we didn't have that same competition of everybody right on top of each other. And then the other cool thing about this area is that we can literally grow almost anything, right? 'Cause obviously there's certain cool climate varietals that don't do amazing up here, but it's not like we're all competing for that same bottle of wine. So what even though there's a lot of Rhones, there's also Italian wines. There's
Spanish.
you know, there's almost every varietal, you know, except for some of those really, you know, not a lot of Chardonnay and Pinot, but there's a lot of that grown everywhere else. So, but it's so cool. And so, and then we're not restricted by having to fit into being an area that makes Bordeaux or being an area that makes Rhones. It's like, you can make a blend with Rhone and Bordeaux varietals. And, you know, there are no limits placed on us here because we were the Wild West. And I think it just created a sense of like, oh, I really like this. Oh my God, have you tried their wines? Check out what they're doing, you know, and our community, a lot of it too is trial and error. It wasn't that everybody here came from Davis with a degree. And even like my generation, where we were kind of the first Cal Poly generation coming out, like as much as I love Cal Poly, we weren't learning much. Like the reality of like what the program is now versus when we were coming out. But like we all, you know, the school motto is learn by doing, but I still joke when I came out of school, I didn't really know when you pressed wines, when we're talking reds or whites, you know, like I was like, so when do we use that? You know, but you learn so much of it on the job. And I think learning from people, you come in with less ego involved. And I think that also helps build the community.
That's such a
Let me
great
just
point,
interject.
Molly.
There's an example of what makes Paso great.
Say that again, Bob.
Go ahead, Bob.
I said that is an example of what makes Paso great right there.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and Molly, I think one of the fascinating things that I just heard from you is, you know, we've talked on this program often before about how uniquely diverse Paso is with all the different varietals and all the you know, from the different regions around the world that the region can produce at a high level. But the part that you just connected for me that I hadn't really thought about is that combined with that kind of maverick spirit of you know, blending everything together also creates something really unique, because when you can make such a diverse set of wines and then have not the restrictions you would have if you were in Italy or France on how you can put those together. I think that's a great point you make. Another part of the kind of secret formula to what works so well in the region.
Yeah.
Hey,
So,
Bob, quick question. You had a early affiliation with association with Scott Olive.
Yeah.
I was reading an article like you characterize it. I was the brawn and he was the brains. When
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe the brawn part might be kind of suspicious, but that is true. Yeah. So when I started, this whole Alta Colina enterprise has been fated to be successful in the sense of finding the right people. Well, actually, not even finding them, the right people finding me at the right time and stumbling across a piece of property that's magical and so forth. So I was telling you that, you know, literally 3 or 4 months before my first harvest, my neighbor called and said, "Hey, would you like to use my winery?" Literally 2 weeks after that, the guy that was doing the vineyard work for me said, "Hey, there's a young winery that's doing, or a young winemaker that's doing some consulting. His name is Scott Hawley. Would you like to talk to him? And so, yeah, I did. And Scott consulted the first 3 years. And as I've said, I did what he told me to do, that type of thing. Yeah.
What did he consult on that first vintage?
Yes, he did. Yeah. He consulted on the 07, 08, and 09s, and they were all great wines.
And by the way, '07, not a bad year to start your first vintage.
I know.
Paso, right?
And to tell you the truth, I was so naive, I didn't even know it at the time.
I've heard some. Matter of fact, I think it was Gary Eberly that told Mike and I that he's convinced 23 might be the next closest vintage to '07 in
Interesting.
Paso yet.
Interesting.
Wow.
It was a nice one, that's for sure.
So, and 21 was, I thought, was
I was going to say
That's-
21.
Yeah, for us, I think
Personally.
that, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, that old 900 I'm drinking right now is a 21, and it's spectacular.
Oh,
Me
thanks.
too. I was just like,
So, Molly, out of Cal Poly, did you go to New Zealand first?
I actually studied abroad in New Zealand. So I did my sophomore year at Cal Poly in New Zealand in Dunedin. So University of Otago, the far South Island. Came back, finished my studies. I spent 5 years at school, science major, Cal Poly. And I graduated in 09. And I ended up working my first harvest. It was actually really funny. I don't even know if I've told you this story, Bob, because we're into storytelling tonight and I just poured my second glass of wine. Again, I told you guys that I wanted to get into sustainable viticulture work. So when I was still at Cal Poly, this job posting came up at Scheid Winery, which is kind of south of Greenfield, a big winery, but they were looking to switch a large portion of their vineyard to the SIP rules, the sustainability and practice rules put in place by the Central Coast Vineyard team. And they were looking for someone to spearhead that program. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to do. So I applied for the job in it must have been in January or something of the year I was going to graduate. Never heard anything. Followed up, kind of dead link. Then I get a call in April saying, oh, we would love to have you. We're doing interviews in Paso at this inn. We'd love to have you come and interview. And I said, okay, just making sure this is for the sustainability vineyard position. Yep. And clearly this is a big company and a hiring manager, because I show up and there's just all of these young people there. And they're like, so what internship during harvest are you looking for? And I go, oh no, yeah, I'm sorry. I tried to triple check that I was in the right place, but I don't think I am. So I ended up just interviewing anyways because I was there. And then they called me up and offered me a job working harvest in the lab for $14 an hour, which was a really good deal at that time, and housing. But I was going to have to commute and live in Greenfield for 6 days a week for harvest. But I took it. I was like, what am I going to do? And then
I did not know this.
I know. I told you, I haven't told many people this story. Jordy's, my husband's the only one who probably knows all of it. So then a couple more months go on and I'm nearing the end of my Cal Poly time. This is right about when I met Bob. I was taking upper level soil science class where we mapped out of raw vineyard land. And we just so happened to spend the entire quarter on Alex and Monica Villicana's property off of Peachy Canyon Road, which was 120 acres of bare ground that they wanted to plant a vineyard on. So we spent the entire quarter mapping out their vineyard. And that's when we presented all of our findings to the Villicanas. And I was the one who did all the viticulture recommendations because I was the only one that was kind of doing a concentration in wine and vit. And that's when I met Bob because he sat in on our presentation. And again, I had dreadlocks past my butt. And Bob sits in the presentation. And afterwards, I remember him coming up to me and being like, it's really interesting what you said about that particular rootstock choice, because I just had planted some of this and this is what I'm seeing. And then he's like, well, if you have time, we're day one, we just opened upstairs. So funny. That's how we met. But
Wow.
I was right after that meeting, I randomly get a call from a winery that I had applied to in San Luis Obispo, like 5 minutes from my house. And ended up having some connection with the woman, and she offered me a job to work in the lab, to work harvest in the lab in Slow, for $9.50 an hour. $9.50. And I was like, oh my God, I just literally I'm graduating college. Like I'm waiting.
Taking a 50%.
Oh God, I'm waiting tables, 5 nights a week. Like this is embarrassing. And I like, look, you gotta get me at least to double digits. Like I'm either going to Greenfield for 14 or like, I'd rather stay here, So they got me to 1025, which was amazing. I had to tell Shide, I'm sorry, I'm not going to come up, which was a big relief in the end. And I worked at the lab for Bailiana. And I was lucky in the lab. A lot of times you get some longer harvests because they oftentimes need you before and after harvest. So I had like a job from July through January there. And I was able to kind of work in the cellar from like 6 to 10 in the mornings during harvest and then do a bunch of the lab work the rest of the time. And that was really great. I really enjoyed it. Went and did some traveling, went to India and Nepal for a few months, came back. Knew I wanted to get a little more cellar experience because I knew if I went right to the vineyard, I would just never come back. And I didn't know enough about winemaking yet. So my original thought was, okay, let me learn the lab, learn the cellar, and then I'll go to the vineyard.
And
I-
Molly, real quick, Bailiana, is that old house?
Yeah,
Do you remember right? Okay.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry. I just want to remember. Just want to make sure I was remembering the right place.
Yeah, so right in Edna Valley there. It's
Yeah.
kind of a stalwart in the area. Yeah, so I decided to work harvest in the cellar in Patho. I got hired at Justin in 2010 and then worked to harvest there. It was too big for me at the time. We did like 1,700 tons. I had no idea. I was clueless. I applied to all the wineries that I really liked their wines at the restaurant I worked at. Saxum never called me back, but this was when Saxum wasn't that expensive. L'Aventure got back to me and said, we'd love to talk to you. We don't pay our interns. And Justin got back to me. So that was how I ended up there. And then I got there, was like, oh, this is way bigger than I thought. But then I got hired full-time and I couldn't really say no to a full-time job. So I was commuting 55 minutes a day to get out there. My full-time rate was 14 an hour. So that was almost paying for my gas, which was great. And then they sold to Fiji Water. And I was kind of trying to figure out what was going on. The winemaker then left and went to Alta Ranch. And his last day, I said, is there any chance you could take me with you? And he said, I might be able to, but like, you just gotta stay for a little bit. And I was like, okay. And then that was in February and it was just cricket. And by May, I was just so over it. It was just not what I wanted to be doing. And I literally like took a Post-it and I wrote, okay, the next 3 years, I was like Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere. And I just wrote all the countries that I wanted to work in. And I went to open my email to send Kevin an email and just say, no pressure, just letting you know, like, I'm going to quit and like go. And there was an email from him. I hadn't heard from him in 3 months. And he just said, hey, I would love to talk to you. Are you available? And I was like, okay, this is kismet. Like, what is going on here? And then, yeah, he ended up hiring me and I worked at Alta Ranch for 9 years before coming here.
So, Bob, before that job offer happens, you'd been how many vintages is it? 13 or so vintages?
Yeah, I
you're
did
making?
13. Yeah.
13.
Mhm.
Do you have a particular philosophy at that point on your approach to winemaking?
I do, yeah. It's so the basic approach was pick on taste, measure bricks, measure acid, but pick on taste. And I tended to lean toward a bit later. Bring it down. We would destem. We wouldn't crush it, so we had whole berries. We'd take that and as we filled the fermenter, most of our fermenters were small, 1.5 ton, these plastic macro bins primarily. We'd try and load up as much dry ice as we could as we filled that fermenter, move it into the barrel room and leave it. That's what the barrel room's at 57. So it's basically cold soaking is the term that's used. And we would pump it over as much as we possibly could, given the time and people that we had available, and just wait. And it's kind of magical here. On day 5, it would start to bubble. Pretty much set your watch by it. Then we'd pick it up with a forklift and we'd carry it out and set it in the sun. We didn't have any heating or cooling available to us. And then we'd continue pumping it over, because you can't punch it down in the beginning. It's just so dense. The berries you can't do anything. We would pump it over as many times a day as we possibly could. I just beat the hell out of it, a lot more than Molly does, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, actually. So, and then eventually, when the yeast went out, the berries sort of get limp and beat up. Then you can punch it down, which is easier. You don't have a pump to deal with. You don't have to clean hoses and such. And then I would just leave it on the skins until it was dry. And then I'd take the free run off, press it, and then I would take the press wine and put it right in with the free run, basically, and then go to barrel for a couple of years. Basically, for a year, I would hardly even touch them. I was a little bit superstitious, I guess is the word. Let them do their thing, make sure they're topped up. And then about a year in, for the first time, really taste those barrels and decide for any blends we're going to implement, like a GSM or a wine we nominate called Sun Worshipper, which is a Mourvèdre-based blend. And then decide that, implement it, go back to barrel for another year, and then bottle it. So pretty simple-minded approach, actually.
But also really, I think that your winemaking philosophy and your wine style was really always driven by the vineyard.
Yeah.
That's one thing when I came on that I really noticed, Old 900 is not the barrels of Syrah from certain blocks that taste this way. It's from one block in the vineyard. It's all north facing. So a lot of the wine program was really terroir driven. As opposed to a highly calculated, this is what I want to make, this is my target, and how do I make it? It was really what the site was giving.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And the other thing that was going on was, I find as I age, my sensitivity, my palate requires more flavor to really register properly. And as I observed, so when I would work on blending, it was more difficult to sense some of the nuances. Is 5% of this better than 10% or whatever? And so I would go back to even more terroir, like our whites. If you go back through the late teens, there was hardly ever any blending at all. I would just say, okay, here's block 3. This is Roussanne, in the bottle you go, that type of thing, which is okay. Those wines are delicious and got good scores and stuff like that. But Molly brings a new ball game to it, where they're much more sensitive and slight tweaks that sort of elevate those wines.
That's the perfect segue, because that's what I want to ask you. After 13 years of kind of your own philosophy, do you then hand the reins over to a new winemaker because they share the philosophy or because they bring something new? What's that approach?
I'd say both, actually. I mean, Molly has been great to work with. In my previous work in the electronics world, I'd handed off several businesses to people, and inevitably a new guy would come in and change every damn thing. I never figured out why. Molly did not do that. She tried to understand what I was doing.
Were you making carbonic Grenache?
No, I was not. She added some things. Which is great. I'm all for it. But she's been very respectful of me, which I greatly appreciate. Of taking those wines and evolving them a bit, and then elevating them and making them better. So
it's a wine evolution, not a revolution. Yeah. That's what our goal.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Bob, how did you choose Molly? I mean, I guess as you were moving away from the day-to-day operation, you had to find somebody that would fit with you. How did you find Molly, and did you talk to any other people?
So the way that came to pass, like everything in this business, was kind of luck. it's kind of like I was bumbling along, didn't realize I had a problem, and somebody would walk up and say, "Here's a solution for you." And I said, "Oh, hell yeah, that, now that you mention it." So Molly and my daughter Maggie, who is our sales and marketing person, have been good friends for a long time, many moons. And I think, at least I think Maggie, my daughter, might have had a little bit of a sneaky thing going on there. I'm not sure. But she kind of hooked Molly and I up. And sort of the history of it is that there was a winemakers meeting down in Santa Barbara. This is probably in 2019, maybe?
19 or 18, because I
18
was
even.
pregnant.
Okay.
I was pregnant with Alma.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was the end of 18,
Okay.
maybe.
So there was one of these deals where winemakers get together. You submit a bottle. Everything, it's all, it's blind. Everybody tastes through and makes comments and this and that. And then you reveal each bottle, and the winemaker then stands up and talks about that wine. And so Maggie, my daughter, arranged for us to drive down together. And so we had literally, I don't know, 3 hours down and 3 hours back, or 2 or whatever it was, to talk. And it became apparent that there was a great potential, a lot of similar thinking. In case you haven't noticed, Molly's pretty damn good. She's, and that became obvious to me fairly quickly. So that's kind of how we got into it. Yeah.
Well, it must be said that as advertised originally, Maggie was going to join us, and then she's traveling. But we're so happy that that I said Maggie, right? Molly could join us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to Maggie sometime in the future here.
Definitely.
So-
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So Molly, you take the reins, and then how do you see that your approach overlapped, and what did you see that you wanted to do differently?
So kind of the way we approached it was, so 2020 was the first one. By the way, 2020 was the year from hell, if any of you guys remember that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was, there was COVID. There was like the world was on fire, most of that
Yep,
harvest
literally.
season. Yeah. Anyhow, I'm sure Molly had some second thoughts, leaving a big old company over there and everything, and coming to this little operation, and then the world just sort of came to an end all of a sudden. But she hung in there, by golly, and got us through it. But when harvest time came around, it was easy, actually. I was very present, but my approach was to be helpful, to make sure that, there's a facility here and there's machinery and utilities and things like that. I wanted to make sure that I helped with anything that came up, like getting everything running, getting things set up, getting things cleaned, connected, whatever. But I pretty much handed it over and said, "Here, you make that picking decision and you make that drain decision," which, since I never bothered to drain, I clearly, that was the easy one to let go of. And she just
then
took
for
it.
Molly, what does that look like for you?
Yeah,
What's-
I mean, yeah, it's to back up just a little bit. So my first day here was March 2nd of 2020. And as Bob kind of prefaced, like I left working
Oh my
for a
goodness.
multi-billionaire February 13th of 2020. Went to Costa Rica for a couple weeks, came here, thought everything was great. Within 2 weeks, the world shut down, and I was working for a small family run. I'm like, oh God, did I make the right decision? But yes, I did. 100% yes.
I couldn't
but-
help but notice that I saw something where Alta Colina was named Winery of the Month in March 2020. There was no bump off of that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
Exactly. I didn't help the tasting room one bit since
Yeah.
it was closed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Molly, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah. I think, in our discussions, Bob and I had a lot of discussions leading up to the position. Bob had tried to bring someone else on a couple years prior, and it just wasn't the perfect fit. And so again, it's like timing is everything. I had my first baby in 2019. I was looking for a little more freedom and flexibility. I think Bob had learned a little bit about what worked and what didn't, what he wanted, what he didn't want. I wasn't my eyes were open and I was looking for something else, but I wasn't in a position where I didn't have a job and I needed to get a job and I just would take anything, And so there was a lot of communication back and forth before I came on that really helped set the stage for that first harvest. So I will get to that. But it came down to at one point, I think after that car ride, we left saying, how about each of us literally type up what is your ideal position? Like I was like, I'm going to go type up what my ideal position is. Bob was going to type up his, and then we were going to come together and see how that would fit. And so part of coming into it was that Bob said that he was really, willing to give me everything from berry to bottle. He said he still wanted to do the whites. Was what he said originally. And I was like, okay. Like I'll take reds. You still want to do the whites. That's fine. And I understand also, like, this is somebody's baby that I'm stepping into. Like, even though Alta Ranch is a bigger winery, like I came on in 2011 and it was a 5,000 case winery, and we built that to 30,000 cases. And like, we were really it felt, even though we felt like a family run winery, like a smaller, we were a little bit bigger version of it, but like we had a lot of ownership and passion to what we were doing. And we spent so much time trialing new things and figuring out what worked. So I understood the respect of coming here. And there was also, it wasn't like I needed to come in and there was a problem I needed to fix. Like as many I've seen, I can't see all the comments, but I've seen a few pop up and you guys are like, oh, the 2007 GSM was my first wine. Like you guys tried those wines. They were all great. Like to me, it was like an honor to get to come here and carry on the legacy that Bob had created and the legacy that was and is Alta Colina. And so, I wasn't coming in saying, I need to change things and make them mine. Like, I was just honored that I was going to be trusted with everything. And it was always the vineyard for me. Like the vineyard is the crown jewel of this property. And, I spent many nights up in the vineyard with Maggie, long before this position ever became, even a thought. And so I knew that I was just really excited to get to work with this fruit. And yeah, it's a funny, like a little tiny side note was I remember one night when they were in the middle of this other hire that like wasn't quite there. And I'd been chatting with Maggie and she was so excited. And then it was like a few months later, she's like, not positive it's going to be the right fit. And I was like, oh man, like, I'm sorry. Like I was really excited for you guys. And then she's like, God, I just wish you could be our winemaker. And I was like, yeah, dream come true. And then it was like years later, it actually happened. But that was like no plans of that at all. So anyways, fast forwarding to your actual question, I feel like I gave you a real politician runaround on that one. So I apologize.
Not at all.
I
But
think we should mention though that your husband, Jordan,
yeah,
is vineyard manager at Tablas Creek.
he is. Yeah.
Much in the spirit of Paso Robles, everybody's family.
Exactly. You should hear our dinner time conversations when we can get a word in over our two children, that is. But yeah, it's fun. Exactly. We're all, the Collins family, and we're like all family pretty much, it's,
Who are very nice people.
yeah, amazing people. Yeah. So honestly, the first harvest I think was easy. Also leading up to the first harvest, like, yes, Bob and I are different generations, but like we are both nerds at heart. And our minds think very similarly about stuff. And there's a lot about experimentation and proof. Like, wine is so much about creativity and science. And you can either be a completely science person or complete creativity and no science, or you can kind of meet in the middle. And I think that's where we are. Like, I'm definitely a meet in the middle person. Like, I love the artistic side of it, but I'm a realist just in life. And like, I want to know the why of things. And so, I was so lucky my years at Alta Ranch, we had amazing funding, amazing facility, and I was able to run so many trials that I really learned a lot of like what worked and didn't work and the why behind that. And so I think I was able to kind of bring some of that knowledge here and kind of explain some of the things that I had seen in my career. And I remember Bob being like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, I remember that one vintage, and it was like, we were kind of going back and forth. So when I talked about certain things that I wanted to implement in harvest, like, is there ways that we can heat our fermentations a little bit? Like, we don't have hot glycol in here. So what can we do? And Bob was like, I'm on it. Like, I get it. Yes, you're right. Like, just putting it in the sun's not going to get to what we want. Like, let's figure out what we need to do to achieve those goals. So I think we both share that. I'm like not even a peon in the brain of that is Bob Tillman, because I mean, he knows literally everything about everything. And I try really hard to know what I know. But I think we were able to kind of come together on a lot of things. And it was funny. We never actually had a conversation about you not doing the whites, but he just kind of, I think he just was like, okay, like, I trust you. Like, you can just take it.
It became very apparent very quickly that she wasn't going to need any help from me on this stuff. So yeah, worked out just great to hand that right off.
So that's perfect. Well, so I know we're a little bit over time. If you're okay with it, I got 3 more. I'll do rapid fire questions.
Heck, we're here. We're drinking wine and having a good time.
Okay. I'll try and be quick though. So first, failed to ask the name. Can you tell us,
Colina.
Bob? Alta Colina. What's
Alta
the
Colina.
first name?
So we incorporated in 2003. Behind me, there are 2 mountains back there. We incorporated as Las Colinas LLC, which means the mountains. Fast forward to 2009, I'm getting ready to bottle something, and I send my label off to the TTB, the government agency that has to approve those things, and they said, nope, somebody in Sonoma is using that already. So it was like fallback time, and fortunately we had brainstormed a bunch of names at the time, and Alta Colina, which means the hill or the mountain, was our second choice, and so we fell back to that, and it turns out it was a much better name. Actually, we're really happy.
Yeah.
With it.
Great
There
name.
we go. Good.
Yeah.
High hills.
High Hill.
Okay, so next is a quick question for both of you, and I can't skip it because it's a favorite. We're looking for a pro tip from you on what you would advise for people as they consume wine, whether it's how they purchase, how they store, how they drink. But if you could just each share one quick pro tip.
You go first. I had to think about this.
So I've got one for you because I thought I saw that list of questions. So when you get a corked bottle, what you do is you get saran wrap and you roll it up like a pencil or something like that. You stick it down into the bottle and don't let it fall in there. And you set it on your counter and you leave it overnight. And the next day you come and pull that saran wrap out and there's no corkiness left.
Really?
No kidding.
Okay, that's a new one, Bob.
I didn't know that one.
That's a biggie.
Wow. Wow.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll give that a go.
Give it a go.
You hit us with a new one. Yeah.
I figured that might be a good one for you guys.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure I believe it yet. You have to prove that one to me. This is how our brains
I
work.
hope-
I'm like, the
I
Does
don't
it
hope I
taste
get
like
the
plastic
opportunity.
then?
Hey, Bob, since I've never done it, I don't really know if I know what corkiness means. So I wouldn't know the difference.
Well, at some
Yeah.
point you will.
you'll know corked bottle.
Yeah,
Corked
you'll know.
bottle. If it's
Oh,
got
corked,
THC.
corked.
Yeah.
Yes, I know
A
that.
corked bottle, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of like wet cardboard.
Yeah,
smell.
exactly.
Right,
There you
I
go.
get it. Musty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't have one, but when you said that, I thought of one. Okay, so pro tip, if you're ever opening up an older bottle of wine, and this is especially useful on large formats as well, is so a lot of times when you open those old bottles, the corks like to disintegrate.
Mhm.
And this is actually this great trick that I learned from this amazing old Italian winemaker in Argentina. His name was Carmelo, and he was adorable. You take the foil off. Hopefully it's not waxed. The wax is annoying. And you take a lighter and you literally just like run the lighter, or you put your bottle sideways and you run the lighter where the cork is, and you just twist the bottle. And because the corks have a little bit of paraffin, a lot of times when they're really old, that's what gets stuck on the wine, or a little bit of wine has come up through the edges of the cork. And if you just hold that lighter and twist the bottle, and then you go to try to open the wine, your cork will just like slide out.
Oh, cool. That's very cool. I like that.
That's a great, boy, two great tips tonight. Thank you for that.
I think the glass expands more than the cork is my theory on that. I don't know about that paraffin stuff.
Well, I don't know about your saran wrap, so.
So, hey, so as we wrap, I want to give you guys a chance to talk just a little bit about what's in your lineup right now and your club, and then time permitting, and we'll leave that up to you. We'll open it up to questions for everybody else.
So we are a Rhone house. I don't know if we really talked about that. So everything we make off of our vineyard is a Rhone. So we offer kind of the core for us is we have 4 whites that we make. We make Roussanne, Marsanne, Viognier, and Grenache Blanc. And soon we'll add Picpoul Blanc, but not quite yet. And then on the red side, we have a Grenache-driven blend a la GSM, Chateauneuf de Pape. We have a Mourvedre-driven blend, which we call Sun Worshipper. A couple of Syrahs, one from a north face, one from a south face, different clones. And we make a Petite Syrah. So there's a fairly broad range of wines.
And a pet nat and a carbonic
That's
Grenache
right.
and a canned rosé.
Right.
And sometimes another Syrah. We're all over.
Yeah,
And a sparkling
It's-
soon.
that's true. Sorry, I forgot about those.
It's okay. They take no work to make.
Yeah, I know. It's simple. And club wise, we have 3 levels of club. We have we ship twice a year, very common. We ship 4 bottles, 6 bottles, or 12. You get a better deal if you take more bottles. They can be red, they can be white, they can be red and white, and we customize. So we basically would like you to drink our wine, and we try not to make it complicated.
Oh, you got a special
Oh,
deal.
that's true. We have a deal. If you go on our website, we're offering tonight's wines, which we've almost guzzled down here.
It's our Viognier. It's our current vintage Viognier, which is the 2022. Yeah, we got someone on it. It's a 16-month barrel-aged Viognier. I picked that 3 different times, different various levels of ripeness. I do skin contact on early ripeness and then 2 different picks. So really fun wine. I was just loving it's really blossoming out of the glass right now. And it was a little closed about a month ago. So I'm really excited where that is. And then we're also offering our old 900 Syrah. So it's a bundle with shipping included if you use the code Wine Fanatics. And I believe it's
All caps, Wine Fanatics on our website.
till May 10th.
I opened a 19
Oh,
That-
nice.
that I asked Maggie, I purchased through Maggie.
Well, thank you for that, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for the generous offer to the members there. I want to say I'm going to have to jump in a second, but I want to thank you both for your time tonight. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. You guys are great. I hope to come see you out there on the property soon.
Anytime.
And I want to thank everybody else for dialing in. Mike's going to lead you through some Q&A for those that have dropped in questions real quick. So Mike, I'm
Thank you,
turning back over to you.
Jason.
Yep,
Thank you.
thanks.
So, thanks, Jason. Anyway,
Jason.
we had a pick, you brought up the pick pole. Somebody was asking, what's the ETA on the pick pole?
Well,
Yeah.
I think we're going to get our first harvest this year, which I'm really excited about. And I think I'm not 100% sure yet. So I'm going to just have to see how that wine does, and I'll be evaluating it during harvest and right after harvest. I'm not sure. It could be an early release wine. So it could be one that we release in the spring of next year, but I could decide that it needs more time and that I'm going to hold on to it and barrel age it. And then it would be released the following spring. So either in a year from now or 2 years from now, I'm not sure yet.
Okay. That's a vague answer. No,
It will be released, but I'm going to harvest it this year for sure.
no, I get it. No,
Yeah.
no, somebody was asking because were you making that at Halter?
Yeah. Yeah. We made some still, and then we also did Méthode Champenoise, Picpoul Blanc as well.
Hey, Steve, you look like you're poised for a question.
Ready to jump. I've been a member of the club. I guess when we started going up to Paso when we moved out to California about a little over 9 years ago, and Alta Colina was might have been the first club we joined while we were out there, and we've really been enjoying the wines. Never fail, never fail. Just one question, when I was up there last week and, we come up a couple times a year. There's such a prevalence now, it seems more and more of women, winemakers. What is the percentage and what kind of growth do you see in it?
So I don't have numbers on that. It's still dismal. I'm going to tell you that. I bet if you looked at assistant winemakers, the numbers are in a good position. There's still a disconnect from getting from that assistant winemaker to that head winemaker role. Especially if you if you looked at all the women winemakers, but you took off like self-owned wineries. So like a lot of the women winemakers, they just had to own their own winery. They had to start their own brand to become the woman winemaker. So Paso's still behind the times. Santa Barbara actually is doing much better than we are in that regard. I believe they have like the most per capita women winemakers. Again, I don't have the actual statistics, but when you look at the graduation rates at all of the universities that have wine and viticulture programs on the, actually on the enology side, the women are out, there's higher percentage of women graduating. We're just still lagging on the full, like getting all the way to the top.
That won't last long. 5, 10 years, it's gonna be the other way around.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But we're still just in that lag phase, unfortunately.
I might say that we have, September, August, I have Nancy Aloha.
Mhm.
She was the very first person we had on. We had about an audience of 6.
Nice.
And in December of 2021. And she's coming back in August because a lot's changed for her.
Yeah.
We have Jordan Fiorentini coming on in November.
Yay. Awesome.
She's terrific too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else got a question? Go ahead, Larry.
Bob, you went straight from high-tech industry, bought 2 mountains in Paso. Did you know anything about growing wine? I mean, you had to reach out and have help to do that, didn't you?
Well, to answer them in order, no, I knew nothing about growing wine. And yes, I did have a lot of help. I was really lucky. I've alluded several times in the conversation about how fate sort of intervened to help out. When I was the few years prior to actually retiring, I was in a tasting group in San Luis Obispo. And one of the members of that is a gentleman that was farming most of the Edna Valley vineyards down there. And I got to know him, and it turned out that his roommate at Fresno State in the viticulture program was a guy that had been working for Beckstoffer, who's like the king of viticulture in Napa for 20 years, and had recently moved to Paso to start his own vineyard management company. And through that connection, he decided to put up with a little guy like me. And so I basically had the best guy in Paso help me install it. And he farmed it for about 10 years before we took it over, maybe 12 even.
Anybody else have a question? Jennifer, I look like you have something to say. Jennifer?
Hi, I put my question in the chat.
Oh,
But-
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I can state it. Hi. My first visit to you, I had what was described to me as a masculine Syrah and a feminine Syrah. I think one was 900, but I can't remember what the other one was.
Toasted slope.
Toasted slope, right.
That's it. Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the first Syrah I bought.
Toasted slope.
Lena. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a pretty magical wine.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And I just wanted to say that I got to finally meet Maggie at the winemakers dinner at Rustic Kitchen here in
Oh,
LA.
yes. Yes. Yeah.
And we had a marvelous time and the wines were extraordinary. So thank you.
Yay.
Fantastic. Thank you.
She's a terrific hostess too. I think the last couple of visits we had there, Maggie served us, and I had a little chat with her about this a few months ago or last year. So she's wonderful.
She's pretty amazing. We're all excited to get her back.
Yeah, she's been on vacation for a while here.
Anybody else have a question?
Just a comment, we had a great time with you, Bob and Maggie, when we were out there last week, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure. Yeah. There's a
Lara?
hand up.
Laura?
So, hi there. Thank you. Thank you guys for being on and doing the offer. And last weekend, we came by right when you opened on Sunday morning, and I said, I'm just coming to buy a couple bottles so that I have something to drink right on Thursday night. And they fit us in for a tasting, and so then of course we left with a case of wine. But we really liked what we were tasting and enjoying it this evening. And I've got people fluttering around me here listening in. But I'm wondering, oh, cheesy meesies. Hi.
Hey, Patrick.
I guess my question is, what is your vision for Alta Colina for the future? What is 10 years from now look like? What does 20 years from now look like? What does 30 years from now look like?
So we actually wrote something down 2 or 3 years ago. Kind of the way this business has evolved is we started selling most of our grapes and keeping a small amount for wine. And we're up now to where we're keeping most of our grapes and selling a little bit as fruit. Our long-term goal is to keep all of our grapes, which will get us to about 5,000 cases of wine a year. We're currently sitting at around between 3,000, 3,500 or something like that. And at that point, we have no desire to continue growing. We have an incredible team here. We have very little turnover. And the financial picture at 5,000 cases is really solid. We can take care of the people in a great way. We can reinvest in our vineyard. We can reinvest in our winery. And so that's where we're trying to get to. And the focus is on making great wines. And Molly is driving hard to make that happen. The other thing we try to do is we call it hospitality, you might call it connection. If you come in here, you're talking to people that have worked for us for years and years, that know what's going on around here, who understand the ins and outs of our growing and our winemaking, and can connect with you. And our goal in life would be to get to the point where all we service is members, that are what we now call a tasting room will become a member lounge, and we can welcome people in here and connect with them and have them enjoy incredible wine. So that's kind of the picture.
I have to always say the same thing, Bob. What attracted us to Alta Colina, you may remember my friends, because I always use the last name because it's very memorable, Magby, right? So we were there, I don't know, 2007, 2008, 9, something like that. And I always say this to every winemaker or whoever does this show. People buy from people they like, and you and your wife and Maggie and now Molly are very likable people, and they want the experience, and you provide a superior experience there. And I want to go up and do the vineyard tour and see the vintage trailers and all of that. But you have something special going on there. So that's what really makes Paso special, because everybody's providing a unique experience. So I tip my hat. I tip my hat.
Thank you.
And Ivy's always a pleasure to deal with too.
Oh, yes.
Right,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. That's exactly what it's all about. It's the experience of dealing with the people that make the wine. Anybody else have a question? Larry, you look like you're gonna speak.
Well, Mike, you let me know when you're gonna be there in October, and we'll join you. And we'll go to the mountaintop with Bob Tillman.
All right.
Perfect. And if you're here in October, I'll put you to work.
That sounds
There you go.
biblical. That sounds biblical.
You guys can go, you can go to the vineyard with Bob, or I'll put you to work in the winery.
We'll work for wine.
Perfect. I'll take you.
Now you got to remember Larry here. Oh, you met him already. That's right. They're from
Mhm.
Florida, which terrific. He and his wife are terrific. Anyways, anybody else have a question? Well, thank you, Bob and Molly.
Yep.
Thank you
I,
all.
Our pleasure. Yeah. Nice talking with you
somebody
guys.
have a
And you-
question? I'm sorry, I missed
If you
something.
guys ever want to get a hold of us, it's Bob or Molly at altacolina.com. We're always happy to answer any wine questions you have, whether it's Alta Colina related or otherwise. We're all nerds in this industry. We love it. So we're here. Reach out.
Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we'll have you back again.
All right. Our
Have a good
pleasure.
evening.
Yep.
Thank
Night,
If
you
you
guys.
want to hang
you.
on and chit chat, I'm here.
All right.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.